Hi, I am Bill Hodges, and this is Spotlight on Government. And we have Linda Saul-Sena with us today. How great! Tampa City Council. I always want to say commission, but Tampa City Council. And you've been there for a long time. How many years have you been back and forth a couple of times, but how long have you been there?
This is my 18th year.
Wow.
18 and a half, and I will, when I'm completed this term, it will be 5 four-year terms, 4 of them citywide.
Wow.
So I've served a long time. As I always point out, I'm not the oldest. I'm the longest serving member of Tampa City Council.
Did you have breaks? Were there breaks in there?
Yes. I served 2 terms citywide, and then I left because of term limits. And our daughters were 4 and 6 at the time, so it was a great time to have 4 years to play with them. And then I came back as a South Tampa representative, and now I'm in my second citywide term again. So it's been a total of 5 four-year terms.
So actually people probably who voted for you this last time weren't even born when you started.
Well, maybe not that, but I will say that I haven't had opposition a number of times, which is great from, you know, an elected official's perspective. So they might not have seen my name on a ballot for a while.
Well, you know, that speaks very well for you. If you can do that, you can get on the ballot and not have to worry about someone else there. That's pretty nice.
It was a lovely surprise to discover twice that no one chose to run against me.
Let's talk about Linda Saul-Sena, of who you are. And part of that is who your family are. Well, you mentioned you had 2 daughters.
Yes. My grandparents moved to Tampa in the 20s, and they started their business on 7th Avenue in Ybor City. And my mother was born here, grew up on Davis Islands in the house that now we have raised our children in, which is a very nice sense of connectedness. And in my family, we just import husbands. So my dad came from Jacksonville, and my husband comes from Connecticut. And then we just keep having daughters who then have to import husbands. It's kind of a
really?
thing, yes.
What are their names?
Eliza and Gabrielle. And they're both at the university, and that's exciting. One's at NYU in New York City, and the other's at Brandeis University in Boston.
You know, people say, why do you ask about families? But I think, and I mentioned this with Councilman Dingfelder when he was here, there's 2 occupations where families are deeply involved, I think. One of them is being a pastor, because the pastor's wife is always expected to be at various functions, and the other is political. The politician's wife or husband is expected to do certain things also.
Well, even if they aren't deeply engaged publicly, they have to put up with the life of, which is a very busy life. I made a point, though, as our children were growing up, to try and not engage them. There's a politician whose name I won't say, who I thought should have named their child Photo Opportunity. And I'm very biased. I think our children are very beautiful, but I don't. I've never even spoken their names much publicly because I felt that was private and I wanted to protect them. My husband certainly was engaged in the conversation about me being in public life, but our children haven't been.
What is your educational background?
Thank you for asking. I grew up in Tampa, as I said, so I went to local schools, Gorey Elementary, Wilson Junior High, and Plant High School. And then for college, I went to Tulane University, which is in New Orleans, which was so much fun. I mean, living in New Orleans really turned me on to what cities can be. It made me fall in love with history, like historic preservation of beautiful old homes, having streetcars.
I love that streetcar line there that goes out to the zoo.
Yes.
I think that is so neat.
It's a wonderful streetcar line. Cafes, urban redevelopment, good music, good food. It was a real revelation. And I came back to Tampa and looked at Ybor City with fresh eyes and thought, well, we have some of those characteristics here.
Sure do.
And how do we protect them? And how do we redevelop in a way that protects the old while doing wonderful new things? And that was one of the impetuses in me becoming an urban planner, which then led to me running for public office.
With your art degree, did you have a great hand in the new art museum?
Only as a cheerleader. I'm not a board member, but I've certainly been supportive of it. And in fact, prior to serving on city council, I was their first public relations coordinator.
Oh, really?
So I was a staff member there. But the way that I got involved in politics is interesting. My mom, I grew up on Davis Islands, and we had yard furniture that was white, and it had these chunks of stuff falling on it. My mother was a very meticulous housekeeper, and she was very unnerved by all the junk falling from the sky on her furniture. And she figured out that it was from the smokestacks at the time. And she organized a neighborhood organization called the Davis Island Civic Association. She set me up behind a card table and said, now, Linda, sell memberships. and I did. And so we formed this civic organization, and the purpose of that was to go down to City Hall and say, what's with the pollution? And I don't know if you remember the name of Roger Stewart. He was head of the Environmental Protection Commission at the time.
No, we've only been here about 10 years.
Well, he was a fighter, and he took this mandate, and he went to fight the sources of pollution, and they fought back, and they called my mother a little old lady in tennis shoes. And she was a very elegant woman, and she was appalled at that, and that made her all the more engaged. And ultimately, they succeeded in getting scrubbers put on the stacks and cleaning up the air quality in our area. But there was all this drama. The county commission at the time fired Roger Stewart, and everybody went down and protested and had him reinstated. There was a lot of drama to it, but the truth is that cleaning up the environment has never been an easy thing, because you always are asking whoever's polluting to stop polluting, and they've never sort of taken to that easily. But it's possible, and I see our culture moving toward a recognition that you can't pollute the water, you can't pollute the air, and I'm very pleased that President Obama has again sort of reinvigorated the staff members of the different agencies who are watchdogs and said, go to it.
I don't understand, in a state where sunshine is so prevalent that just about every house doesn't have solar cells. Somebody ought to...
We are working on this. I have great news. Today at 1 o'clock, Carl Nurse, who is a recently re-elected city council member in St. Petersburg, has asked the city of St. Petersburg to work with the city of Tampa, the county of Pinellas to work with Hillsborough County, to all go after some federal stimulus money to do conservation, energy conservation in all our communities. And with this money, we will then bond it, have additional money. People can spend money on solar panels, for example. Let's say it costs $10,000. So you pay for it over time with the money that you're saving from having put up the solar panels and having lessened
Sounds like a
monthly
great
utility
idea to
bills.
me.
It's such a great idea. They've done it in Oakland, California. And Stephen Chen, the new head of energy in D.C., saw that as a model in his hometown and thought, we can do that here. So we're applying for this money. I hope you knock wood, we get it. And then we just go after getting folks to take advantage. And you don't have to be low income to do this. It's a win-win-win. You save money, you use less energy, and then TECO and Florida Progress don't have to spend as much on building new plants because there's less demand. So I see it as just a terrific opportunity for our community. Plus, I love the fact that we're working cooperatively with our fellow governments across the Bay. I think all of that is to the good.
Oh, I think it's extremely important. Ecology to me is one of the great challenges that we have. I mean, I believe in it. It's getting hotter. I look at the poles and I see them receding to where there's going to be a ship channel through there soon, they tell me. There's a northern passage. Never been in our lifetime, or in our experience even, that passage is.
Nor in the experience of life on Earth. So.
Yeah. Well, maybe somewhere, sometime, but not any of the people that have recorded it. And we've got to do something, and people like yourself who are deeply involved in making sure that happens, that we do something. Something's better than nothing.
Well, there's something, and then there's more something. We need to be really engaged. And I'm impressed, I have to tell you, with the private sector people and the nonprofits who are picking up this recognition of sustainability and actually making changes. I just talked to someone from Tampa General Hospital the other day. They have a huge sustainability program, and they're saving money and doing the right thing. We in the city are beginning to do it. I'm a real pusher. John wrote the legislation, and I'm trying to push the city forward into being sustainable in all our buildings and all our activities, and working with the people from whom we purchase goods and services to make sure that they're greener. You know, it's a ripple effect.
Well, you know, the beauty of this is, with 20 years experience in the city, you know where all the bodies are buried. I mean, seriously, you know where to go, who to talk to, and what they can do and what they can't do. And that's my big argument against this term limiting people out. No company in the United States, not one, could survive if you fired all their top executives every 8 years. They'd have no corporate knowledge, and you'd have a bunch of minions at the bottom running things. And that's what happens when a politician first comes in office. Staff is running things.
Well, we have competent staff, but I think that
But they're not elected to run anything.
Right, and as representatives of constituents, we have to be sensitive to what our constituents want, whereas staff people don't have that responsibility.
That's right. You know, in 20 years with the city, what are some of the greatest events that you can think of that you were involved with, and which are some of the things you would really like to see changed?
Thank you for asking. I have to say, the very first thing I thought of doing when I was first elected was changing the character of Kennedy Boulevard, which is right near the film studios here. When I was elected, there was a temporary jobs place at one end and a blood donor center at the other. And I had actually worked in an office along Kennedy. And my mother was concerned. She said, "What about those guys?" And I said, "Oh, Mom, they're just passed out. I just step over them, you know, not a problem," which was not a very humane attitude. But the truth is that we really had a tremendous problem with homelessness and with Kennedy being sort of Skid Rowish. And I decided that transforming Kennedy into its former glory as Grand Central, you know, a major boulevard between our downtown and West Shore, a prime commercial center, would be a key goal. And I have to say it's taken forever. But
Still working on work in progress.
I'm working, but I can see specific reinvestments, both by the public sector and the private sector, that have truly changed its character. Coming to our interview today, I drove from downtown here, and we now have medians in the center with trees. We have beautiful sidewalks. We have reinvestment in residential uses and commercial uses on both sides, and it looks a hell of a lot better, and it feels better. I'll know that I was successful when I finally see the cafes I've always dreamed of seeing on both sides, and people walking comfortably from where they live to where they work along Kennedy. But that has been a major goal. That's been a success. My greatest disappointment stems back to my mother's goal of trying to clean up the environment. I believe that we should have as clean an environment as possible. And a few months ago, we renegotiated a franchise agreement with Tampa Electric Company. The two goals I had for that agreement, I had three goals for the agreement. First, that it be short-term, because I feel that the field of energy is changing so rapidly, we shouldn't lock ourselves into a long-term agreement. Secondly, I felt that there should be a commitment in it to renewable energy. And thirdly, I wanted to see that TECO was willing to pick up part of the tab on taking overhead lines and putting them underground. I wasn't asking them to pay for the whole thing, but voluntarily, Florida Power and Light picks up 25% of the tab. I was unsuccessful in all three categories by one vote. It killed me. We have a 25-year agreement, which I think is way too long. There's no commitment to renewable and no commitment to undergrounding, and I just think it's completely mediocre. And I'm very disappointed that the administration and TECO didn't come up with a better franchise agreement. And I know that they're a shareholder-owned company. My husband and I own shares in them, but I really felt that thinking toward the future, toward sustaining our planet, that they needed to be more proactive, and I was disappointed.
Well, I would agree with you. I think that there are definitely some areas where corporations need to step up a little bit more.
Yes.
Over the years, they've been very profitable by raping the environment. And somebody has to step up and pay for it now. If it's current shareholders, so be it.
Well, and they could still make a profit. I'm not denying them profitability. I think that actually investing in renewable energy is a strategic way to go instead of just spending money on lobbyists for the coal industry, which is not a forward-thinking thing to do. And have you heard the phrase greenwashing? It's an interesting phrase.
No, I'm not.
Greenwashing means you purport to be environmentally friendly, but you're not really. It's like whitewashing, but with green.
Oh.
And there are a number of people like Monsanto and Tico that are ostensibly supporting the environment, but if you look at the actual policies, they're not particularly, and that's disappointing. Because it could be just as profitable to do the right thing and invest in sustainable practices.
It must be somewhat difficult sitting in a city where you have the county overlay, and then you have the state overlay, and then you have the federal overlay. All of them not necessarily wanting to go in the same direction you do.
What you try to do is develop friendships with people on the different levels and work in tandem with them. We are so fortunate right now to have Congresswoman Kathy Castor up in D.C. She's been very effective in getting herself placed on excellent committees, and she really is committed to a sustainable environment, and she's done a lot to bring resources back here for that.
I have tried diligently to get Kathy on this show. She came on a number of times when she was running for office. She came on when she was in office with the BOCC, but I can't get past her gatekeeper now.
She's really busy.
I can imagine. But I have offered her, and I've offered Congressman Putnam both, the opportunity to come in and do 30 minutes about how they feel about health care, without screaming, without shouting, without people waving banners, but just explaining why they have their position. And neither of them have been willing to take it up, but I hope those of you watching out there, if you've got any chance to bring them on, do that, because no hidden agenda on our part. I just would like to give them 30 minutes where they don't have to worry about somebody waving a sign in their face or throwing something at them to explain.
That's a very generous offer, and I'll encourage them to take you up on it, because this is an opportunity for discourse, which is just rare and special.
Well, and without the support from the Tampa Council, we would have a real trouble keeping the lights on here. We are the only public access station in the state of Florida that's still on the air.
That's shocking. I think public access is important. I've actually changed my vote based on a show that was produced at this station. It was years ago. We were talking about Bayshore and how wide the sidewalks should be and whether there should be bike lanes. And the citizens produced a show that convinced me, and then I was a tipping point vote on council for how we should go about redoing Bayshore.
Well, it's the only place that the people have an absolute voice, that they can do it unmuted, and sometimes I'm not sure that's great. But everybody has a right to think and do and say what they please within bounds. Obviously, Supreme Court Justice Black defined where the bounds were. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. But I think there is a place for this where you have an opportunity, and you folks have been very helpful to us, and we certainly appreciate that and look forward to the county commissioners getting behind us again in the very near future.
I hope they will. We've got, I feel like with the election of the new commissioner, Beckner, that there's a more civil atmosphere there, and hopefully they'll recognize the value of what public access provides.
I cannot say enough for Kevin Beckner. The people in Sun City Center, who he doesn't represent particularly, just love the man.
Well, he's citywide. I mean, he's countywide, so he does represent
Well, he
them.
does, but I mean, we're just one small population. If he's done as much for the rest of the county as he has in helping these retired people, but Kevin's been helpful, and I really appreciate that. If you had the opportunity to talk to your constituents and to the people of Tampa directly, and could do it in 1 or 2 minutes, what would you say? And why don't you just take that opportunity and talk directly to them?
Thank you. I love our city, and I'm sure you do too. We are so blessed. It's beautiful, but we've got to get a grip with where and how we have development. And the way that we can do this best, I think, is by developing transit systems to serve us. I would love to see the streetcar do a giant loop. I would love to see the light rail initiative successfully be voted on, and you can vote on that. And I want to see our neighborhoods strong. So if you're watching this show, you're obviously interested in government. Vote, nag your elected officials to support transportation, speak out to protect your neighborhoods, plant trees, join civic organizations. They really make a difference. And know that 3 letters or 3 emails or 3 phone calls is a groundswell of public opinion. I have seen so many good projects happen because people who live in an area care enough to call up and say, this is important to us. I can think of one right now. It's in Sulphur Springs. I'm so excited about it. The county had some land where they had their parks and rec people work for 20 years. They left there in December, and the Sulphur Springs neighborhood said, we really want this as a place for a local museum, for children's programs, and it's happening. And I'm just thrilled, and it's because of neighborhoods speaking up. So thank you for watching this. Thank you for being engaged, and know that your voice really makes a tremendous difference. And you can always call my office. Thanks. So,
You
thanks
know,
for
Linda,
the opportunity.
one of the things you said there triggered something in my mind. You were talking about joining various groups and organizations and getting active in the community and volunteering time to do things like that. And today's world, so many people say, volunteer? I don't have time to volunteer. But 2 of my friends who lost jobs, their companies folded, or one of them got company folded and the other one moved, have new jobs as a result of the contacts they had made in these volunteer organizations.
That's great.
One had been president of a volunteer organization, and the people in it saw his skills at leadership and an organization. And when they found out that he was out of a job, one of the people that belonged said, hey, you have exactly what I need. Come to work.
That's great. That's terrific.
Now, they didn't go into those positions thinking, I might need a job sometime. But by giving, they got. And there's just too many people out there that want to withdraw money from the bank before they put any in.
Well, and it also makes you happy. It makes you happy to connect with people and accomplish something. But for people who are shy or busy or have kids and getting a sitter's too complicated, you can do things online or through letters that make a big difference that you don't have to leave your home for.
Facebook.
Yes.
Both of us are on Facebook. You're on there, and so am I. And I have made so many contacts with people that I haven't seen in years. William and Hodges on Facebook. And I've just made so many good contacts with people I haven't seen in 25, 30 years.
Isn't that amazing?
Who just happened to stumble across me, or it's sort of that 6 degrees of separation, where all of a sudden you have a friend who has a friend who has a friend, and all of a sudden they're seeing you and saying, oh, I know him, or I think I do.
Isn't that fun?
Oh, it's a ball. Recently in council, you just passed a anti-discrimination law. Let's take just a minute and talk about it. What was the purposes of it?
Well, I'd like to go back 20 years till I was first on council when we first considered having a human rights ordinance. And the purpose of the human rights ordinance, we've already protected, I think, gender and ethnic background, but we hadn't addressed homosexuality, and that was not protected in anti-discrimination for housing or jobs. And this came to City Council. At that time, we had not a very progressive council, so we waited till one of our members left and was replaced by someone who was more progressive. And then Jan Platt was a county commissioner, and I was a young...
I love her.
She's wonderful. When I was a young council member, at the time I didn't realize I was young. Now, looking back, I was young, and I was the only woman. So it was,
wow.
There's 6 guys and me. And Jan and I decided that it would be easier to pass a human rights ordinance if we did it cooperatively between the county commission and the city council, to have a joint meeting. Because we had, well, first we had this idea for renaming Buffalo Avenue in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King. So I went to the chairman of council at the time and I said, we want to have this joint meeting. And he said, Linda, you can't, oh, he called everybody else Mr. I was Linda. He said, Linda, you can't do that. And I said, why? He said, because we've never done it. And I said, well, that's not a good reason. So Jan and I organized this meeting, and we were successful in renaming Buffalo in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King. And we had that meeting at the old Curtis Hickson Auditorium. That was torn down. The Performing Arts Center was built, so it gives you an idea of the timeline. And we had this joint meeting, City Council, County Commission, to adopt a human rights ordinance. 1 million people showed up. The sheriffs had the idea of checking people for weapons, which turned out to be a good idea because people were bringing weapons.
Really?
It was the most intense. Prior to that, the most intense meeting was the street name change. This became the most intense meeting. People were just angry, and if you could have seen the vibrations in the room as color, it would have been purple, and I mean it was a very intense meeting. Zillions of people, lasted about 5 hours. All of us were sitting on the stage at the Performing Arts Center with really bright lights, so we couldn't see the crowd clearly in terms of faces, but we could sense the scale of it, which was filling the auditorium. And after that, after 5 hours of testimony and a long time voting, both the county and the city voted to adopt a human rights ordinance.
Now
and I
we
was
have to
very proud of that.
fast forward to today.
To yesterday, and the city council voted on an upgrade of that. You know how it's like human rights point two. We recognize the protection of what are called transgendered people, transsexuals, people who are changing from one gender to another, because under our current law they're not protected. And it was a unanimous vote.
Wow.
So I feel like,
you know, maybe we are growing up.
Well, one of my colleague, the chairman, Tom Scott, who's a reverend, said, you know, Linda, you can't change people's hearts by laws.
I love Tom too.
I do too.
By the way, we just are running out of time. I could go on. You've been a great guest. I've just enjoyed you being here so much. You will come back. I will come back. Thank you. I've enjoyed it. I would love having you back. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm Bill Hodges, and this is Spotlight on Government. We've had Linda Saul-Sena as our guest, city council person from Tampa. She's been a great guest. We've enjoyed having her. You're unique, you're special, and you're great. Tell yourself so often, you know, because you are. We'll see you on the next Spotlight on Government. And again, Linda, thanks for being here, and you will come back. I will. Thank you. I'm going to count on it. Thanks a bunch.
Tampa Bay Community Network, may I help you?
Hello, I would like to produce a TV show on your planet.
Great.
Do I have to be a Tampa resident?
No, you don't have to be from Tampa. You don't have to take our video production training classes to have a show on our channel.
Really? Well, I'm from another planet. Is that okay?
It's fine. Tampa Bay Community Network members come from Orlando, Vanderbilt, Lakeland, everywhere. Being from another planet is no problem. You're from my galaxy, right?
Yes, I am. How do I get started?
Sign up for orientation class. We have them twice a month, and they are free.
I'm in. Sign me up.
Anyone over the age of 18 can take video production, and Final Cut Pro edit classes, produce programming, and host programming right from our studios located on University of Tampa campus. 813-812-254-1687 today.